Fire Upon the Deep is a space opera unlike any other, published in the early 90s. The entire story hinges on one particular idea, and that is the zones of thought. Capabilities of intelligent life and life in general change based on how close you are to the galactic center. Picture the Milky Way. So at the very center, the core and the things encompassing the core make up a zone called the unthinking depths. And it's just as you'd imagine. These are creatures who are incapable of attaining true sentience. And then the next layer, as you go a little bit farther out, which the Earth happens to inhabit, is the slow zone, a place where you can't have FTL travel. The only intelligent species that have arisen that have achieved interstellar travel have done so by way of cold sleep, putting yourself into cryogenic slumber and going for the long haul and spending hundreds, if not thousands of years traveling from star to star. Finally, outside of that is where things start to get a bit more sci-fi and interesting. You have the beyond, which is where all of the various intelligent species have sort of conglomerated into a huge society that spans untold numbers of star systems. You have all sorts of different creatures, most of them being humanoid, but Vinge isn't stingy. He gives us some non-humanoid aliens that are really interesting, most specifically the Scrode Riders, which are essentially bonsai plants riding Roombas. You think I'm joking, but I am not joking. That is specifically what they are. They are bonsai plants riding Roombas. They're super intelligent, though. They know how to pilot these incredible spacecrafts. Their primary career fields as a species is interstellar trade. They're like salesmen who go between star systems and meet different species that have never met other aliens or anything, and somehow they're able to talk their way through things and haggle. And they're incredible, incredible characters. I think my favorite part of the book, to be honest. There's one more zone besides the beyond. Outside the beyond, there is the transcend, which is the most outer zone of thought in Fire Upon the Deep. So in the transcend, you have godlike entities that at times are biological and at times are AI, but it really doesn't make much of a difference what their origins are, because they've transcended to a certain point. All the creatures and beings in the transcend generally don't care at all about what's happening in the beyond or what's happening in the social hierarchy there. They have their own games they're playing, and it's quite fascinating. It's left to be pretty mysterious. However, the premise of the story entails one such entity known as the Blight, which is essentially a super intelligent virus. To call it that would cheapen it, but that's probably the best way to understand it in simplified terms. So there is a human colony, Stromley Realm, and the Stromley Realm is the largest conglomeration of humans, like those who have heralded from Earth, in the beyond. I could be getting that wrong. It might be Nijora. There's another one called Nijora that it's one or the other. They're both big societies of humans. So the Stromley Realm, the heights are getting to me for some reason. Anything for the shot. So the Stromley Realm, they send out a group of researchers, essentially programmer archaeologists, because, I mean, think about it like this. You've had computer systems for millions and millions, if not billions of years at this point. They're going out to try and find lost information. And where are they going to find it? Well, they venture into the transcend, which is pretty much the most risky thing you can do. Attempting to find some lost treasure of information, a database that would be endless riches for their people. In the process, they awaken something that has been disabled for a long time. And this happens to be the Blight, or a super intelligent entity that's transcended beyond an AI and has been waiting for someone to open it up. It's slowly manipulated these researchers to awaken it, essentially. I've said essentially like 8 times. Convincing these researchers to slowly awaken it. This is the intro to the story. You're not really given much context before this, but essentially, oh, there it goes again. So the only defense they have against the blight after awakening it are two humans who have been killed, but somehow their mind has been brought into the same computing system as the blight exists in. Transcended copies of human beings. And they aren't able to stop the blight, but using information that exists within these databases, they're able to put together a plan and at least do kind of one long shot to see if they can save everything. So there are two ships that attempt to narrowly escape the blight, but it blows up one of them and there's one left. And in that second ship, everyone else, a bunch of children essentially, God, I said essentially again, why do I keep doing that? Like it's some like smart thing to say, and it's not. So the ship has these cold sleep boxes full of kids who are going to be awakened as soon as they find somewhere habitable for them. But otherwise, there is one family who is awake. It's a mother, father, and then there are two kids, a young boy and a young girl, the older sister and younger brother. And those are the main characters that we follow throughout the A-plot. The kids' names are, so you have Johanna, which is the older sister, and you have Jeffrey, with an I, who is the younger brother. So they make this daring escape from the blight, but in their escape, they find a planet that's kind of just on the border between the beyond and the transcend, where they crash land. They don't know what to expect, what's going to be there, and so they're on edge, of course, but it seems to be a habitable planet. It's got trees and stuff. So the mother and father go outside to either seek help or try and figure out their surroundings. And immediately they are ambushed by an intelligent species who is in their medieval sort of stages. Now, this species is one of the other incredible strong points of this book. They are called the Tines. They are the Tines. So they are ambushed by the Tines, which are a sentient dog or wolf-like species that don't exist as individuals. Well, they are individuals, but their individuality comes from a pack mentality. And so they literally are one soul, one being, but as a pack. And the way that they are able to accomplish this is what is called thought speech. So you know how dogs have a larger bandwidth of hearing than we do? They have a larger frequency range that they can understand. You know, a dog whistle, how it can piss off a dog, but we barely even register it, that it is there. So they are constantly chattering these really high-pitched, strange noises. And what that is, it's like processing. It's data they're constantly sending back and forth to create a, what is this? I almost said it again. A link between their consciousness. Their consciousness is this sound-based thing. They literally are one person, and their names are a bit difficult generally because their individual name is all of the pack animals' names put together into one big long word. Like, as the mother and father are defending from this ambush, they're killed. Jeffrey and Johanna are stuck on their own on the Tyne world, marooned on this planet, these two kids, and they have to survive. But the problem is they're separated between two factions. One faction saves Jeffrey and the other faction saves Johanna. And Jeffrey, the young boy, doesn't understand that he has been picked up by the villainous faction. Johanna, she's rescued by the heroes, but even then, she's picked up by this animal species that look like dogs with really long necks, that do everything with their jaws and their paws. They don't have hands, but they're able to accomplish tasks that we could, but by way of utilizing the entire pack, where each set of jaws is like a finger almost. And it's really interesting how they're able to do this. And so they're able to operate on her when she's injured. They're able to eventually access what is a toy to Johanna that's meant to be like an educational program for youths, but they get their hands on it and they open it, and it ends up teaching them all about the societies and the beyond. And so they're able to learn about this and get a little bit of context, and through it they learn the English language. And language to them comes so naturally because they have this huge frequency range of sound that they're capable of. And human speech to them sounds like burps or gurgles or something. So Johanna, she's kind of a jerk to them because, I mean, well, she's a kid and she's stuck in this medieval dog world. Meanwhile, those who are meant to be their saviors are the B-plot. Now, the Blight is wreaking havoc. It's not just a virus ruining databases. It's literally destroying entire civilizations one after the other. They call it the Stromley Blight at first because it destroys literally the entire Stromley realm. So billions upon billions of humans, leaving only one human society to remain. So Ravna and Fam are those who are trying to save these kids. But first they have to escape the Blight. Now, Ravna is someone who is working at one of these massive interstellar databases for this other species that's near human, near enough. They're quite alien, which, once again, such a strong suit for this book. But their entire species is destroyed, and she's the last one amongst them. She narrowly escapes with a couple of Scrode riders, and with Fam, who is a human, but his history is quite interesting. So Fam Nguyen is sort of her love interest. So Fam Nguyen began in the slow zone, where he was part of a crew that would put themselves in cold sleep and then use, I believe they're called ram drives, where they just push as fast as they can, sublight speeds, so it's taking hundreds if not thousands of years to get from one planet to the next, let alone one star system to the next. And he is killed at some point, but his remains are reanimated. His intelligence, his psyche is reknit by the society that Ravna was working for. Eventually, some being from the Transcend uses him and downloads their own consciousness into him. I believe that's actually the mechanism of how they were able to bring this guy back. So he's part Fam, whoever he is, and he's part whatever this transcendent being is. And the transcendent being, very early on, is murdered by the Blight. And his last moment is a moment of revenge, putting all of his power, all of his strength into Fam, but giving Fam back his personality. So it's this person who's slowly remembering who he is, but also he has this untold potential where it's a bit like a fantasy novel almost, but it's all sci-fi based. It's a really cool balance. I love it when fantasy and sci-fi mix because really they're the same thing. Vernor Vinge really accomplishes that in this novel. So all the while, the villainous Times, the faction whose leader is named Steele, has convinced Jeffrey that they're allies, they're good people, and they have learned that there are other species in the galaxy, and they want to get a head start and be given as much technological prowess as they can so that they can conquer and kill the good guys and take over their own planet and then go farther. And this is dangerous because the Times are actually extremely advanced, even in comparison to other species, so they would probably transcend at some point and wreak havoc. So Jeffrey actually grows very close with a pack of pups who are bred to be super intelligent. So they use kind of like a eugenics kind of thing, the villains do, to get a very specific sort of intelligent pack mind that they can build. And they've built this character named Amdi, AMDI, and he's super intelligent, and he's also been lied to throughout his life and believes that Steele and that entire faction are good guys. But in reality, they're just manipulating him and going to use him as a weapon. So Jeffrey becomes so close to Amdi that they start referring to them as Amdi Jeffrey. Just like I was saying, the Tyne characters, their individual name is based off of every name within the pack, and so calling them Amdi Jeffrey, they're seen as the same individual at this point, even though Jeffrey doesn't have the ability to do thought speech. But Jeffrey helps the villainous faction known as the Flenzerists convince Jeffrey to teach them about radios and interstellar communication. And so they're using sort of an Ansible sort of thing with no lag to send essentially text messages to Pham and Ravna, who are trying to come and save them. And so you have this building tension of the villains convincing the rescuers of our protagonists that they're actually the good guys. So as time's ticking down, you're wondering if they're going to figure this out, and there's like little breadcrumbs, but the villains keep kind of snatching up the breadcrumbs just before they're discovered. So Jeffrey and Johanna, they don't know that their sibling is alive. They think that they're dead, and they think that the opposite faction is responsible for their death. And meanwhile, you also have the cold sleep boxes that have an entire generation of humans just sitting there. The cold sleep boxes can only last so long. Eventually they'll thaw and they'll all pass away. And at that point, humanity may as well be doomed, because they don't know if any other civilization of humans have survived the blight. So you have both these factions developing weapons based off of human discoveries. So they're jumping from medieval times all the way up until like inventing cannons. And the B plot, the blight is blamed on humanity, and people think that the blight is actually linked to humanity. And so there is a species called the Abrahanti. They've got like butterfly wings. They're humanoid in shape, but they're extremely specious, and they essentially want to exterminate all of humanity to hopefully stop the blight, although of course that's not going to do anything. So Pham and Ravna have to pretend like they don't belong to that species, but of course, things come crashing down. That gets across the premise and the storyline. I don't want to explain any more because there are a lot of really cool moments in this book that I feel like anything more would be a spoiler. And double so because I don't think this book is really rereadable. I think that you're supposed to discover it. Maybe I'm sure there are people who love rereading it just because of the concepts or getting to know these things better, because there's quite a bit to master here, which I'm sure I have not. But I feel like as a narrative, it does hinge a lot on surprises. But that's not a negative. There were moments in this book, in fact, there was one specific moment in this book that has built more tension than I have experienced in any other form of media, where I really didn't know what was going to happen next. And thinking back, it still isn't quite obvious. But if I were to read it again, that entire section would be perhaps meaningless. This is one of those things where if you could wipe your mind and read it from scratch again, that would be awesome, because there's just so much that works best when you experience it for the first time. Now, I do have a few gripes with this book. Throughout the entire novel, you have showing. The show versus tell. You have showing throughout the entire novel. Then all of a sudden, at the very end, where everything is culminating, the most significant point of the book, they just sort of tell you what happened, and it happens off screen. Like, it's not actually there. It's like somewhere far away. And the concept of the ending, I see why he needed to do that, because it was pretty much the only way to describe it, because there would be no characters there to experience it. But it was a little annoying. Vernor Vinge was so great at showing in detail all of these things, but then at the very end, doing a tell. And there's nothing wrong with telling. It's just kind of time and place, You shouldn't always show. There are times where you need to tell, and this just struck a really great balance with that throughout the whole story. Then all of a sudden it was just like all tells, where at first I thought, oh, did he just get lazy or something? But the more I think about it, the more I realize that no, this is just the only way it could have been done. And it was a really cool concept, and it makes complete sense because it's this thing that you've been learning about throughout the entirety of the book, and you have a really great grasp on it by this point, and so you understand it. And it wraps up all the storylines quite well. The resolution afterward is really nice. I actually really like the resolution afterward. Just that climax, though. The climax was very frustrating. Everything leading up to the climax, chef's kiss, gold. but the climax itself, resolution, beautiful again. You got to be in for the long haul for this one, I think. It's one that you don't want to rush through. You're not meant to rush through this book. You're meant to explore it. And I would definitely recommend reading this, but I'd also recommend not rushing. So one other thing I hadn't mentioned yet, there is this thing called the net. It's essentially an internet that goes throughout the entire galaxy. Now, this is based off of the Usenet, which apparently was a precursor to forums. This is like very early internet days. And so you have long stretches where there are what seem like forum posts by different species. And I thought that was really cool. It takes a moment to get used to it because you have all this syntax that just isn't relevant anymore. Nowadays we have social media and it's spoon-fed to us. How come things have to be exactly as they are in the distant future? I mean, we're looking at different scales here. If you're sending a message from 10,000 light years away, why would it have to retain the same level of quality as a YouTube video? Thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for subscribing. It really means a lot. This is recommended to me by Zach McDaniel, who drums in my band SLEEPCYCLE, and he has some amazing taste. And yeah, I'm gonna get down from here now.